Greetings, Earth. Welcome to the Nostalgiaverse.
Hello and welcome. As always, I'm your host, Kat, and today with me is Alex.
Hello.
And Nick.
Hello.
Today is a interesting, and we're going to try and keep it as PG as we can. Adult cartoons. Fire and Ice, Heavy Metal, Rock and Roll, Cool World, Wizards, and similar films. Animated, some of them animated and live action, like Cool World. Some of them purely animated, like many of the others. It's an interesting genre, and one of the things that I have found in my research with a lot of animation and comic books is that they were originally adult entertainment, which is why some of the more mature themes in some of the older cartoons and comic books. It wasn't until later that they began to be geared more for kids. And now, and especially in the 70s and 80s, we're seeing a resurgence of that. And with anime, just because it's animated does not mean it's for kids. There are some very kid-friendly animes. Granted, a lot of animes are very much adult-oriented, very much adult-themed. Akira, for example, is a classic. Very gory, very bloody, very adult. And there's a lot of, that's why hentai is a thing. So, we're going to try and focus more on Western stuff rather than anime. That's going to be for a discussion for another time. So, with that in mind, let's get into it. So adult cartoons in Western culture, like I said, originally cartoons and animation was for adult entertainment and then became geared for kids. And then in the 70s and 80s, you started seeing more of a resurgence of mature content for animated, especially in feature films. One of the earlier ones, which is based actually on a regular circulation magazine, Heavy Metal, very adult themed, very dark, became a movie which later spawned a sequel. The sequel was not as well received as the first one, however.
It was all CGI. It was horrible, horrible CGI.
But the original was much more in keeping with the way the Heavy Metal magazine was. She had individual, stories, but they linked those stories together through a particular item that was featured in each story. Very adult themed, violent, a little on the sexual side in some cases. Not for kids. At all.
To be honest, being the youngest of the podcast and watching it, I was like, okay, this is trippy.
Yeah, and I'd seen it way back years ago. And so it's definitely one of those that make sure you're over 18 at least, because it's really not appropriate for kids at all.
Well, at least you're 16. Wait till you're 16.
Oh, minimum. At minimum.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There was also one that I had seen, Rock and Roll.
Oh, God. I love that movie.
That one was really good.
Yes, especially had the evil David Bowie. That's very much what he reminded me of, an evil David Bowie.
Yeah, he was really cool. Mock is his name.
Mock.
It's one of those that takes place kind of in the future. Dogs, cats, and rats have evolved to be human-like with sort of animal-ish features.
Living together.
Dogs and cats living together. A total anarchy. Yes, it was a Ghostbusters film. Anyway. But it was actually a lot of fun. Again, more mature themed. In that one had a lot of reference to the occult. due to, what Mach was doing, summoning other planar denizens and so forth. It was one of the better ones, I think.
I have not had a chance yet to see this, considering, like I said, I'm the youngest member out of all of us, so...
Yeah. Rock and Roll was actually a lot of fun. I might even go back and watch it again. It's here in the next few weeks because, I have a 16-year-old son, and it's one that, I would be comfortable with him watching it because it's not really sexualized at all, though there is kind of hints at it, but it's not overt like some of the other ones can be. For example, Cool World, which was a mix of animation and live action, and that one was, not appropriate for kids at all.
Yeah.
You need to be 18 to watch that one.
I will say this. I have watched Cool World, not recently, but in the last couple of years. And just in case anybody says anything, I am 25 this year, so it was about 4 years ago, so I was about 21 when I saw it.
Yeah.
And it's weird.
To watch that one.
There's so many plot holes in that movie.
Yeah.
Well, just to let you know, the main character who in Cool World, who is like the artist who think he drew Cool World, he did because he's Satan. So people who don't know that reference.
And in order for characters from Cool World, from the animated world, to enter the real world, they have to do certain things, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it is oh so very adult. And I will just leave it at that. You can draw your own conclusions. It was weird. My mother and I we saw it, and we just kind of looked at each other and went, okay, that was weird. Next! Let's not watch that again. That one was just bizarre. I don't know what they were thinking, but damn. Wizards is a classic.
Ooh.
Absolute classic. If you haven't seen it, watch it!
You killed him! You killed Rick, man! You killed him! No, I'm alive, man! I'm alive! You bastard! It was a great film.
Oh my god. That movie was great. And if I remember correctly, that was Ralph Bakshi was involved in that one.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, he was. So if you've seen the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings, same guy did Wizards.
Oh, did he?
Yes!
Oh, wow.
Yes! That was Ralph Bakshi. It's like, oh my god! So you know it's good. You know the animation is good. And he learned, he did Wizards on the heels of doing Lord of the Rings back in the 70s. So this was like the next thing or two that he did right after that.
That's cool.
It was a trip. It was a trip, and it was a really cool trip.
I'm going to say this now. If you haven't seen the Lord of the Rings one, you tell me the Lord of the Rings one isn't a bit of a trip as well. True.
I grew up with those.
Well, we're not. No, it's the two. Was it Two Towers? Was it the Two Towers? No, the Fellowship was the trippy one. They mix actual animation and actual people acting.
Yeah.
No, that was in the Lord of the Rings, and that was they call it rotoscoping. That was I grew up with these movies. I grew up with the original animated Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and Return of the King. Return of the King went back to the same animation style as The Hobbit. Ralph Bakshi did Lord of the Rings, which combined Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers into one movie. And that's where you had people there was live action, but that was animated over, and you can tell where that is. And it was a little weird watching it, but it wasn't badly done. And I mean, especially the Nazgul and the horses were just creepy as hell.
Right.
The way they did it. And it was really good. It was really good. And again, going back to adult animation, the original trilogy of, Tolkien's work from the 70s, the animated, those were quite mature themed. I mean, Hobbit had more music in it because you had various things where, creatures were and characters were singing, like where there's a whip, there's a way, that one.
There's a way.
Yes. I still remember that.
I think it was they want to go home. I don't want to go home. I can't remember what that verse after that.
Yes, but it was that was the orcs, and so there were various songs in the Hobbit. So it was kind of, that one was more kid friendly. But when you went into Lord of the Rings, it was very much more mature, especially with as terrifying as like the Nazgul were in that. So, and that goes, again, Wizards, very much the same. It's the same style because it was same guy who did them. And he learned quite a bit from doing Lord of the Rings, I'm sure, and improved on what he did to do Wizards, I think. You watch the animation, the way the characters are animated, they feel more real because they're matching actors' movements. It feels less animated, even though visually it is animated. And Wizards is much the same way.
Have we mentioned another film yet, which I still haven't seen, but I need to watch? Fire and Ice?
Oh God! I've seen that movie when I was a kid. Oh my God! 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 God!
Another classic.
And you haven't watched it yet. Shame on you.
Like I said, I grew up in the 90s.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Kat.
Oh.
I've seen bits and pieces of it. I haven't really had a chance to actually sit down and watch it.
I have to say Fire and Ice. Barbarians. Why can we not get like another anime series of that?
From what I understand, it's actually it was really, really well done. Not just the animation, but the story and the characters were really well written and portrayed. So you can kind of see just from these few, and there's a lot more out there. Trust you, look it up. There's a lot more of them. This is just the very tip of the iceberg. And this is not even getting into anime, Japanese animation. This is just Western animation. And it runs the gambit from the cheesy, holy crap, what the hell was this, of Cool World, to the cinematic visuals of Wizards, to the just awesomeness of Fire and Ice and Rock and Roll, to just the dark and gritty of heavy metal, and it runs the gambit, just like, live action films. And they're worth looking at, even some of the bad ones, that are like, what is that? They're at least worth checking out just to see, what was this? What did they do with this? And who knows, maybe somebody will, pick up that concept and completely rewrite it and create a whole new thing that was better than the original, like with Cool World, for example. Maybe somebody will completely redo that concept. Sort of like what they did with Planet of the Apes. I grew up watching the original 5 films and the 70s, series that lasted all of one season. Planet of the Apes. I love Planet of the Apes. And in '01, this was right on the heels of Hollywood's, let's remake everything and do it badly in the 90s. And so I wasn't going to watch it. And then I got to talk to somebody who actually worked on it. He told everybody, it's like, there are 3 kinds of movies that you work on. The kind you can't wait to get it over and done with. The kind that it's fun doing it, you enjoy doing it, and you move on. It's like, can take it or leave it. And then there's the ones that you can't wait to see it when it's done. This was the latter category for him. For Planet of the Apes, the '01 version. And he convinced me to go see it. And then we've since had 3 others. And it's not a remake, it's a reimagining. They took the concept of the Planet of the Apes and they wrote their own version of it. And somebody could easily do that with some of these older animated adult films, like Cool World, and actually do a better version.
If you think about it, for like Cool World, at the time, it's the technology back then. It was green screen mainly, or blue screen, depending on.
It was green screen at the time because they started with basically a black velvet screen, and then it went in the '80s. It was blue screen, and then in the '90s it became green screen. It's been green screen ever since. So it kind of changed based on the technology that was being developed at the time.
Yeah, like, I will say this now. One of my favorite films, like you were just saying about Cool World, it's another live and animated film that I think these 2 films could be done better with the modern age technology. Like, we've got IMAX cameras now, we've got tons of other stuff. Like, and the software has changed as well, to the point where we could literally have a person, we've seen it, trying to find which film it was recently, had an animated cartoonisk.
Well, there's 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. One was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is awesome. I love that movie. That's another one that falls into the, adult animation mixed with
children aspect.
Live action, but it's like Cool World. It was live action and animation, but it was more adult themed, more grown up themed. Hello, Jessica Rabbit. Okay, just saying. But it wasn't nearly to the level of adult that Cool World was.
Yeah.
So, teenagers, she's just drawn that way. It was more teenagers.
Yeah.
It'd be perfectly fine for teenagers. Another one, Space Jam.
Yeah. That one was
in the late '90s.
Like I was saying, was a product of its time because of the technology.
But they did a great job, and it was three-dimensional, not 2D animation. Which is what made it different from the films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Cool World that had come before it. It was the animated characters were 3-dimensional.
Whilst we're talking about this, we may actually be seeing a new version of Space Jam at some point. There is talks of a Space Jam 2, and I think it was with LeBron James instead of Michael Jordan this time.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. It's done. It's over. We should just move on because we don't need another. We don't need another Space Jam right now. Because if we would have gotten another Space Jam, well, it should have just been 2 or 3 years apart from it. But now, like a decade, it just feels like it's too little, too late. Like Crocodile Dundee, that's coming out. That is the son of Crocodile Dundee, which he is not even Australian and looks like some random actor, redneck. Like, I'm sorry, just leave it alone.
This is what I was trying to say. We're going to see, possibly, a new version of Space Jam with modern age technology. So we have no idea how this is going to turn out. This could turn out, like, it could be a smash hit, no offense to the old one. It could be a smash hit due to the case of the technology back then. It was quite limited, even though it was, pardon my language here, it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I was about to say something.
And if you go back and you watch, because I remember Space Jam. I liked Space Jam.
I grew up on Space Jam, and I'm not even joking.
That was a fun movie. That was a fun movie. And even though there was a lot of more adult kind of theme to it, it still appealed well enough to kids. You know?
Sorry, I'm just trying to remember the name of Lola. Oh, Lola.
Lola Bunny, yes.
I'm still thinking this is actually a true story. That's what happened when he's back when Michael Jordan retired from basketball. I went into baseball and then went back to basketball. And I think this is a true
golf.
story. That's a true story. It's a true story.
What?
Yep.
The Looney Tunes spoke to him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it has to be. And I love how the fact that one scene, all the Patrick Ewing and a few others went to see a seer in a crystal ball and talks about Bugs Bunny and Michael Jordan and everything's all true and they're all looking at her. Okay, done.
Yeah, it was literally it was the four basketball players who lost their talent from the aliens.
Yes.
That's going to say the Oracle, but anyways.
Yeah, because so then he got the basketball that had their talent, and I think if I remember correctly, weren't some of the guys, weren't a couple of them from the Harlem Globetrotters?
No.
No, they were all from different teams.
Different teams at all.
Yeah, I thought one of them was from the Globetrotters though.
No.
The short guy.
Which one? Charles Barkley?
The short one.
I don't know.
Awesome.
No.
He's from Charlotte. I think it was the Charlotte Hornets.
I think.
No, I don't remember at that time. I don't remember back then. But yeah, it was. And their acting was really good. I'm surprised on that too.
Oh yeah.
They did it with a straight face. I'm like, oh my god.
And these were, at the time, these were some of the top players in the NBA at the time, along with Jordan. So you can understand why they're like, oh, we're going to steal their talent. It's like, okay. It was wild and wacky and fun.
I just love the fact that Bill Murray shows out of nowhere and the guy's like, whoa. I didn't know Dan Aykroyd was in this picture. I'm like, I just started rolling. It's like, oh my god.
I know.
But
I know.
just to show you that a film like Space Jam that was made in 1996, right?
Yep.
That is animated with the Looney Tunes in 3 dimensions still had aspects for the adults, like to the point where if you are an adult now, go back, watch it, and it'll be a totally different film. Like, I will say this now, the interaction with Lola and Bugs, when I was a kid, I just thought he was like just in love with her, but now being an adult, I know there's more to that.
Uh-huh.
And actually, the adult scenes now with the basketball players where they all doing different tests and that, it's not as child friendly. Well, I say not child friendly. It is child friendly.
It's more technical.
Yeah, as an adult, you know what they're doing. You know how ridiculous what they're going through is.
Yeah, and you understand it better.
Yeah.
Not to say that it all goes over the kids' heads.
No.
It doesn't. But there's stuff, kind of like what Disney does, is there's stuff, it's a kids' movie, yeah, but there's stuff in there for the adults.
I've got one straight away for you, and I will say this, and it has been edited out in recent years. Little Mermaid, Priest.
Oh, yeah.
If you nobly needs my buttocks.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody messed up with the animator or made the animator mad or something, because that is not a knobbly knee. I will tell you now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of rumors in regards to some of the animation in some Disney films. For example, The Lion King, where Simba goes over and he flops down and kicks up all that dust. What you see in this cloud of dust is the letters S, F, X, special effects. It was a nod to the team, the effects team that was working on it. It was SFX, not SEX.
I will say
they saw the F and they assumed it was an E. I was like, no, it's an F, guys. Look closely.
I will say this because when I was watching it recently, a couple years back, I will say this: It does want because of the animation style, because you've got to draw each bit by hand,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's animated that way. Because of the way it's drawn, it does for a while look like. So I can see why some people picked up as SEX instead of SFX. Is because the dust particles do join up at the bottom towards the end.
Yeah, and
Of the
it makes
shot.
it look kind of like an E, but it's actually, if you notice, it's actually a separate line
Yeah.
of the movement of the dust. It's a separate line. It's actually not connected to the rest of the letter,
But
if you look closely.
anywho.
But yeah, and there was like this whole thing of, the Little Mermaid's castle on the cover that had the spires on the I've actually seen that picture.
I can vouch for it because my mom's got the VHS still of the Little Mermaid. I can still vouch for that picture.
Yeah, and I was like, "Okay, that's not mature at all."
Yeah.
So there, some of the rumors are true, and some of them are mistaken identity. So
some of them, I will say this: take it with a pinch of salt.
Yes. If you hear rumors about something in like an animated movie that, especially a Disney movie that, oh, they did this and it's all, this, and this. It's like, you know what? Watch it for yourself and make your own determination.
It's like with these other adult films that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
We can sit and discuss them all we want about them, but like I'm sitting here, I'm going to be looking up Fire and Ice and what was the other one? I've forgotten. Rock and Roll. Yes, thank you. I will be looking them up and I'll be making my own decisions from them because that's the case with most things. You've got to make your own decision. You can't just go off what other people say because, no offense, Alex, if I was to ask you about Rock and Roll, would you or would you not be biased?
No.
That's not the answer I was looking for, but oh well.
I can honestly say that on the one hand, you ask me about a movie that I've seen. In some ways, yes, I would be biased because of how I felt watching the movie. But if I step back and look at it from a technical aspect, which is something that I've been able to do since I was a kid, because I've been into, movie special effects and all of that since the mid 80s when, way back in the day. And so I could step back and say, well, from a technical aspect, looking at it from that perspective, there's this, and this. And this makes it good or this makes it, not so great. With Cool World, visually, it wasn't bad. It had some pretty cool effects and visuals and stuff. The story standpoint, the way it was written, yeah. Let's just put it that way. Some of the themes and what was actually in the film and what they did is like, 18 over only. Period, full stop. That's what I would say about Cool World. Rock and Roll. Visually, beautiful. Story, I think was well written. And it does resolve the story at the end. And, things are revealed and handled in a pretty cool way. Would I recommend somebody watch it? Oh, hell yeah. That movie was a lot of fun. Heavy Metal, same thing. But I would add the caveat, it is dark and very mature. Bear that in mind when you watch it. So I try to come at it from two different perspectives and give both sides of it as much as I can. Not everybody can. They're well worth watching, just if only for the standpoint of research, if for nothing else. Some of them you can find on YouTube. I think Rock and Roll is on YouTube right now. You might be able to find one or two of them on Netflix, either to get as if they're not streaming, you could probably get them on DVD from Netflix. Look them up on Amazon. I'm sure they're there. Amazon has everything.
Oh, wait, what about the Black Cauldron?
Oh, I love that movie.
That is actually, was that a Disney? I cannot remember.
Yes.
It was Disney.
It was Disney. It was Disney. It was based on the Chronicles of Prydain books, with some artistic liberties. Gurgi, for example. Just say, I love Gurgi. Very much more mature. I wasn't even a teenager when I saw it, and I loved it then.
Right.
Kind of shows you, but that was just me. I think I was like 10.
And I have not seen this movie yet.
When I saw it, I saw it in the theater, and it was only in the theater for like a couple of weeks, and then it was pulled, and for a long time Disney would not admit that it existed until finally there was like, I think, a 20-year anniversary, and they finally released it, and I snatched it. The split second I saw it, I snatched it, because my mother and I both really enjoyed it. We really liked it, and we were one of the few lucky ones that actually got to see it in the theater when it first came out in the 80s, late 80s.
Yeah.
And loved it.
And there was this other thing that I will bring up because Hasbro doesn't want to speak of it. Inhumanoids.
Oh, Lord.
Yes, Inhumanoids. That was based on a toy line, but the series was brought up with Flint Dille, who did the writing for Transformers, who is a big, H.P. Lovecraft type of thing, animation stuff. He wrote it, and that series, the mini series, and the show was so dark that in the opening, you see all the main characters fall into the lava, or somebody who turns into an undead zombie by zombie touch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that series, it only lasted about 13 episodes, but Hasbro doesn't want to acknowledge it. I mean, and I think we were talking. I know what Buzz Dixon said, they were talking. They only did a couple episodes, and I forgot what he said. But yeah, Hasbro doesn't want to acknowledge the series.
Wow.
Because it was so dark. It was a very dark series.
Yeah.
A very dark series. Yeah, it was a very, very dark series, and
That's like with Disney and the Black Cauldron for the longest time. They didn't want to acknowledge it, and now it's out there. It's on DVD. I grabbed it the split second it came out on DVD. I'm like, that is so going home with me. I love that movie. There's a lot of people who are avid fans of the Prydain books, and some of them didn't like it because it wasn't exactly like the books. Well, I'm sorry, you're never going to find a film based on a book that's going to be exactly the same as the book. They have to take certain things out. Some things just don't work on film that work just fine in a book, and they have to take them out or change them. That's the nature of the translation between, from one media to another. And you also have to take into consideration the time it was written versus when it was produced as a film. It's like with the comic books. You're not going to get a movie or TV series based on a comic book. It's going to be exactly like the comic books. It's like Captain America. You're not going to get Captain America's exact origin story with the little kid Bucky running around during World War II. It's not going to happen.
No.
Well, historically speaking, they did have kids like 16 to 13-year-old kids drafted though, so technically they could, as historical speaking.
Yes, but they were never on the front lines. They were back at base camp and stuff. They were helping the soldiers and stuff, and they did that in World War I too. And then after that, they wouldn't do it anymore. It's 18 and older only. They took what they did with Bucky. They made him Steve's best friend from childhood, and as an adult, he went into, if you've seen Captain America: The First Avenger, there you go. You see what they did with him, and because Marvel had, brought the character forward as the Winter Soldier in the comic books, they used that. It's not going to be exactly like the book or the comic book or whatever, but it's going to be based on that and taking the best elements of it and showcasing it for an audience that normally would not go for the novel or the comic book. And then after seeing the film or the TV series, okay, well, how did this all start? Where does this come from? And then they go back and they read the original and become fans of the original source material as well as the films. That's kind of the idea behind doing this. Kind of like the Harry Potter franchise. You've got the movies, and then people, they watch the movies and then turn around and went and read the books, which made the books all the better for that, because there was so much more in the books. But if you read the books first, the movie becomes disappointing. So you can kind of see where that balance is. It's to help bring new audiences as well as to appeal to the things that the longtime fans of the original loved the most in that story. And so that's why there's that disparity between, like with the Chronicles of Prydain versus the Black Cauldron, which is it is more mature. I mean, you have the Cauldron-born, which are essentially skeletal zombies, the skeletal zombie army. It's very dark, and there's, a sacrifice of an innocent life is made to stop it, but it was by the choice of the person who made the sacrifice. And so it is much more mature in that regard. And it was one of the darkest things Disney had ever done up until they did Gargoyles. I love that series. I love that series. They brought in Shakespeare into it. And it was dark and awesome and just so that's another one, Western animation with a more adult theme, because they brought in Midsummer Night's Dream, Othello,
Malekith, Loki. They brought in a lot of other characters that made the series quite dark.
Odin.
Even just in bringing in, because they had Macbeth and Midsummer Night's Dream and some of the other stuff, and this is all Shakespearean, and some of this stuff is dark Shakespearean, like Macbeth.
I will say this.
It's like,
we can all think Gargoyles the first season got dark, but I will say this now: the second series, Goliath Chronicles. Have you watched it?
Yeah.
They did bring in stone bashers, which were gargoyle extremist Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're like Nazis, but KKK and all this, which really was more adult than for children. Like, I remember watching it.
And you had the Quarrymen, who were gathered to destroy the gargoyles.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've seen it, but there was the Quarrymen.
Yeah.
And they were hell bent on destroying the gargoyles. So you had both sides of it, and you had, Brooklyn was matured and, looking at having a mate of his own, and bouncing through time at one point, in the series. And so, Brooklyn was my favorite of the gargoyles. I like him. So again, more mature theme, but there was stuff in there that the kids could enjoy. But it was much darker than, like, Tailspin, for example. Much darker. Much more mature. Much grittier. And so then after they did Gargoyles, and that was such a huge hit, there was a convention based on it, the Gathering of Gargoyles, that ran 13 years. So then they thought, okay, well, then we'll go ahead and admit to having the Black Cauldron and release it on video. And then there you go. So, and it's, and even if you look at some of the other Disney films, there are some moments that are much more mature. You go way back to, like, Sleeping Beauty. That one had some dark moments. With the dragon and the evil sorceress.
Like I was going to say, if you compare Disney from the golden age, I would like to call it, to the Disney of now. Like, if you compared, and I'm gonna be honest here, if you compared the situations from, say, Little Mermaid and Moana, which one's darker?
Moana. Just because it has the rock in it.
From a story perspective, you've got Moana who's chosen by the sea, who finds a deity and has only one thing to destroy or solve, right? Mm-hmm. In The Little Mermaid, Ariel had to deal with what?
Ursula, the sea witch.
A father, overbearing father.
Mm-hmm. Unrequited love.
Yeah.
And the barriers between them. You know, dark magic and betrayal, and there was a lot going on.
Yeah. No, I literally just summarized what happens in Moana. Yes, she goes through some bits and bobs, but if you look at the Disney's, yes, I will say this now, the twists and turns in Frozen was a brilliant idea. But if you look at the Disney films now that are coming out now, they're
not as complex.
Yeah, they really aren't. They're not. I would say they've lost their edge, the darkness. Like
one exception to that, I think, would be Brave.
Yeah.
Because she's dealing with what she considers an overbearing mother and a father who dearly loves her and 3 brats of little brothers trying to choose her own fate and things being chosen for her, but she's also dealing with a magical curse that she stumbles into and then comes to realize that curse goes back generations through the clans, through her own people, and has to resolve not only the curse that she inadvertently brought down upon her family, but also the centuries-old curse from the Old Kingdom. And trying to, so there's a lot more there than, like, what was in Moana.
Yeah. Like, I'm just trying to prove.
So they are stepping up a little bit, but it is more simplistic than it used to be.
Yeah. Like, I'm just trying to prove is, with adult cartoons, there's a lot of complexity. Yes, there are some films like Cool World where there are a lot of plot holes, but then there are, like, some masterpieces like Fire and Ice, Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
Like I say, I haven't seen them yet, which I'm going to. But if they're masterpieces, we can still learn from adult cartoons that you can't always keep. Now, this is going to sound weird, but you can't always keep children isolated from the dark world. You can't keep them isolated from bad things. That's what I loved about the original Disney films. They showed the ups and downs of life in a way that a child can actually perceive them. Like with the Black Cauldron. You saw how dark that got, but it was the ups and downs of life.
Yeah. And especially with the Black Cauldron, it kind of illustrated the point of you may try to, stand on your own to protect others, but ultimately no man is an island unto himself or herself. No one is completely separate from everyone else. What we do influences others. What they do influences us. And when you have friends, family, people who care, people you care about, people who care about you, you're never alone. You never stand completely on your own. And even if you think you don't matter, you do. Look at Gergi. Gergi was, very much that in a nutshell. He thought that he didn't matter. His life didn't matter. That if he made that sacrifice, then everybody else would be safe and it wouldn't matter about him. Ultimately, he was wrong. He did matter because they cared about him. As much of a pain in the butt as he could be sometimes. But they did care.
But like I was trying to point out, is you can't take the world of, like, the adult cartoons show, like I was saying, the ups and downs of everyday life, which is a good
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
It's a good thing. It prepares you for things, but anyways, that's my
You can't-
final thought on it.
Yeah, you cannot protect people from the dark side of life. They have to know that it's there and be prepared for it, or they will not be able to survive dealing with it. You cannot put your child in a bubble and expect them to be able to survive adulthood. It doesn't work that way. You know, they have to learn and understand, and you have to be there to guide them and teach them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, on that note, we will thank everybody for listening to our ramblings about adult cartoons and mature themes in animation. And see you next time.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And you have to be there to guide them and teach them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, on that note, we will thank everybody for listening to our ramblings about adult cartoons and mature themes in animation. And see you next time.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.